I don't even know how to explain what's happening here, so I guess I'll just say it. There was a window in the middle of the woods. I was on a camping trip this weekend in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains with a few of my buddies, and I walked away from our camp on Friday night, and there it was. We were supposed to be miles away from any roads or towns or any signs of civilization, but what I was seeing was unmistakable. A window, illuminated from the far side of the glass, with a light from a room behind it, pouring out onto the forest floor. Initially, I could only see the light shining through the trees, and I was unsure of the source. It honestly took me longer than I cared to admit to realize just how out of place it was. When it became clear to me that what I was seeing shouldn't have been there, I decided to investigate. Maybe I shouldn't have gone alone, but it didn't occur to me that it could be dangerous. Somewhere deep down, I assumed that me and my friends were the ones who were out of place, and that we'd somehow gotten lost and accidentally set up our camp in some nice person's backyard. As I made my way through the forest to get a closer look, I fully expected the frame of a house to come into view through the darkness, but it never did. There was no house. Only a window. I crouched behind some bushes and stared, trying to process this completely unnatural structure floating in the middle of the wilderness. I couldn't have been more than 50 feet from the glass, and I could see the trees all around it and directly behind it. It just hung in the air, attached to nothing, surrounded by forest. But through the glass of the window itself, there wasn't any forest at all. There was a room. As I tried to make sense of what I was looking at, it seemed like I was peering into a well-lit suburban kitchen. There was a black inverter refrigerator with white cabinets above it. I saw a matching stove that sat in the middle of a spotless granite countertop. The kitchen had an island in the middle with 3 stools evenly spaced, and each stool had a cushion with a soft blue and silver floral pattern. It was too far away to make out the details of the pattern, but I knew what it was, because they were the cushions I helped my girlfriend Amanda pick out 6 months ago. This was her kitchen. I tried everything I could to make this thing go away. I rubbed my eyes, I shook my head, I even slapped myself a few times to snap out of whatever hallucination I was surely having in that moment. But it didn't go away. The window hung there as though it was staring at me just as much as I was staring at it. I went back to the campsite and I told my friends what I'd seen, and they all had a good laugh at my expense. Looking back, if I was in their position, I probably would have laughed too. But I wasn't in the mood for games or in the state of mind to see things from their perspective. Something was very wrong in that forest. Something unnatural. I almost got into a fight with Noah, because if anyone was going to be an asshole and slip some hallucinogens into our food on this camping trip, it would have been him. As my friends caught onto my distress, they began to take it a bit more seriously, even if they were obviously, and honestly, justifiably, skeptical. Andrew, always the mediator, offered to let me lead him to the window so he could see it for himself, and I agreed. But as I tried to retrace my steps, I couldn't find any sign of the phenomenon anywhere. There was no light through the trees, no window hanging in the air, no kitchen behind the glass. Andrew just looked at me with pity, and that made me more angry. When we returned to camp, everyone laughed harder. The next day, I half expected to wake up hungover from the effects of whatever it was I'd been dosed with, but I felt fine. This was supposed to be a week-long camping trip, and I didn't want to start things off on a bad note, so I tried to forget about it. I kept a close eye on everything I ate and drank, and I played it off as a joke. We did some fishing and complained about our horrible bosses and made dinner when it started to get dark. When I went into the woods again that night, I tried to sneak away to avoid anyone giving me a hard time, but Noah saw me leaving, and they all had a good laugh at my expense. I ventured about 50 feet away from the tents, and I shit you not, there was that damn window in the trees again. Once more, I went to investigate, and it was exactly what I remembered from the night before. Same window, same refrigerator, same island with the same bar stools. This time, I noticed a person's shadow on the wall, flickering in the light of the kitchen. As I watched, my girlfriend Amanda appeared from just outside of the frame of the window, with her hands together, carrying something she'd just chopped up on the counter. She made her way to the stove and released whatever she was holding into the frying pan. I swear I could smell it. I'll never forget that smell of those onions caramelizing. As I hid behind some bushes in the middle of the forest, 75 miles from where she was cooking. I must have sat there watching her cook for 10 minutes before I heard some rustling behind me. I was so focused on what was happening behind the window, I must have jumped about halfway to the moon. The rustling caused me to snap out of my confusion, and I turned around to see Andrew coming out of the bushes behind me. "Hey, there you are. Thought I'd better come check on you after last night. What are you doing out here anyway? I thought you were just going to take a piss." It was just... I started. I turned back towards the window, and it was gone. This time, I kept my mouth shut. It's nothing. Let's head back to camp," I said, and so we did. It wasn't easy getting to sleep that night, having witnessed these events in perfect clarity 2 nights in a row. I was finding it harder to convince myself that the whole thing was just my head playing tricks on me, and that was beginning to make me genuinely worried about my own sanity. As I struggled to drift to sleep, I felt this really strong compulsion to go back to that spot, like an overwhelming urge that just pulled at my consciousness throughout the night. I don't know if it was just curiosity or something else, but it really did feel like something was calling me out there into the forest. I resisted the urge, but every time I opened my eyes, I swear I could see a faint light in the distance shining against the side of the tent. On Sunday, I skipped breakfast, and I combed through every inch of forest around us for hundreds of yards, looking for some sort of sign I wasn't going insane. There were definitely no houses out there, or windows of any kind, floating in the air or otherwise. There was no kitchen, no island or bar stools, or any sign that anyone lived within 20 miles of that spot we'd set up our camp. Of course there wasn't. We were in the middle of nowhere. I felt silly even thinking about searching the area, but I still knew what I saw. I tried to spend the rest of that day relaxing and calming my anxiety, but the days are short around here this time of year, and I was dreading the moment when the last bit of light drained from the sky. My worries grew with every passing second, and everyone was starting to notice that something was up with me. It wasn't a joke anymore. My friends were beginning to get worried about me now, and Andrew talked me into lying down in the tent with a wet cloth over my head. As much as I wanted to, I couldn't make the daylight last forever, and eventually we were in darkness again, with no light but the campfire, and I had to use the bathroom. Andrew tried to get one of the guys to go with me, but Noah scoffed at the idea. "He's a grown man, dude. He can piss on his own. He doesn't need help," Noah insisted. I half-heartedly agreed with him, but the reality was that I would have been a lot more comfortable if somebody had come with me. I made my way away from the tents, and this time I tried to stay on the edge of the light from the campfire, as close to the campsite as I could get away with. It didn't matter. I could see the light from the window again, maybe 100 yards away, shining like a beacon through the forest. I felt the pull again, and it didn't even occur to me to resist it. I found myself walking toward the window until I could once again make out the details of the kitchen and those soft blue and silver stool cushions I knew so well. Amanda was cooking dinner again, her hair up in a bun, stirring whatever she had in the pot on the stove. I could hear the faint sound of music, a live album she loved to listen to in the car when we drove, and I could see her mouthing the words to the song as she stirred. Shadows danced on the walls of her kitchen again while she cooked. It was strange to see such a familiar scene in such an isolated place. My attention settled on the shadows. The movement on the wall was the same place I saw Amanda's shadow the night before, but the night before, she was just out of frame of the window. Now she was at the stove against the far wall. There was no light in that kitchen that could have cast Amanda's shadow at that particular spot. My heart sank as I realized she wasn't alone. A figure appeared, but I couldn't make out who it was. I could see everything in that kitchen perfectly, but this person seemed to be almost a blur, despite the fact that they were moving slowly across the kitchen towards Amanda. Whoever it was, they were wearing black, but the details of their face and body were impossible to make out, like somebody had taken a paintbrush to just their particular location in space and time and smudged away whatever used to be there. The figure was creeping up on Amanda, and when it was centered directly in front of the window, it stopped and looked at me. It slowly raised one hand into the air, and it waved to me, before turning back to Amanda and lunging at her. I watched the knife plunge into Amanda's back, and I heard her screams echoing through the forest around me. I jumped out of the bushes, and I sprinted towards her misplaced kitchen window. The knife plunged into her again. Blood sprayed across the window as I reached it and pounded my fists against the glass. I could hear her screams, muffled by the gurgling of her own blood, as I kept trying to break through the glass, and I scrambled through the window frame to help her. I emerged on the other side, only to fall back onto the forest floor. I picked myself up out of the dirt and pine needles, and suddenly I was in complete darkness and silence, except for the sounds of my labored breathing and of my heart desperately trying to pound its way out of my chest. I examined my hands, and they were bloodied from the deep cuts of shattered glass, but there was no glass around me. There was no window, nor was there an Amanda or a mysterious figure. There was just me and darkness and blood. I heard footsteps coming toward me, and the figures of Noah and Andrew appeared from the trees. They were out of breath. They later told me they were sure I was dying the way I was screaming. The two of them escorted me back to the campsite, and Andrew wrapped some bandages around my hands as everyone in the campsite tried to calm ourselves down. I told them what I saw, and we all agreed that I probably wasn't mentally fit to finish the camping trip. Yesterday morning, Andrew and Noah walked me the 7 miles back to my car, and I assured them I could make it back home and they wouldn't have to cut their vacation short. They hiked back to the campsite, and I drove to the hospital to treat the injuries to my hands that none of us knew how to explain. On my way there, when my phone had a signal again, I tried several times to call Amanda, but she never picked up. The 24 hours since I left that forest have been a wild ride, and probably the scariest and most heart-wrenching of my life. When I was in the ER, 2 detectives came into my room to question me, and I learned that Amanda had been murdered the night before in her home. In the kitchen, to be exact. She was stabbed with a knife 17 times. I hardly had a moment to grieve before the detectives put me in handcuffs and escorted me out of the hospital into a police vehicle. At the moment, I'm only being charged with trespassing, pending the full investigation into the murder and analysis of the blood they found at the scene. The detectives questioned me relentlessly, but ultimately couldn't charge me with a murder, and the judge granted me house arrest of lieu of bail. During the interrogation, I learned that Amanda's neighbor told the police she saw me on Sunday night outside of Amanda's apartment complex, hiding behind some bushes and watching her through the kitchen window. I keep trying to tell myself that it'll all just blow over because I have witnesses who can attest to where I was, but I'm really struggling to keep myself grounded through the whole thing, and I was up all night again thinking about all possible outcomes. What if my fingerprints are on that window? What if my blood is on that window? Will it even matter that my friends can testify I was 70 miles away in the middle of a forest? I wish so badly I could get out of this house, surrounded by all the memories of the woman I loved, the woman I wanted to marry. But thanks to being on house arrest, I'm stuck here, trying and failing to hold myself together. Then this morning, I got a phone call that changed everything, and now I'm sure it won't matter. It won't matter if my DNA is all over that crime scene. It won't matter if my friends can confirm that there's no way I could have murdered Amanda. None of it'll make any difference. The call was from Andrew.
I just want to say that I believe you,
he said.
I saw it. I saw the window. I hiked all the way back to the cars to get service so I could tell you.
You saw it? I asked, relieved that at least I knew I wasn't crazy. Amanda's dead, Andrew. It was real. Could you see what was going on in her house?
She's dead? Oh my God. I'm so sorry.
He paused for a moment, processing what I told him, and then he said,
I think you need to run.
It's too late for that, Andrew. They have me under house arrest. They already think it's me, and they're waiting for the DNA results. I explained to him. Andrew, I really need to know what you saw. Could you see any blood on Amanda's window?
No.
He stuttered, trying to find the right words.
No. You don't understand.
There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment, and then he spoke.
I didn't see your blood. I didn't see it because the window wasn't looking into Amanda's house.
He continued, and my heart sank.
It was looking into yours.